hello again guys, and welcome back to the channel. So for today's video, I'm just going to show you what deck I played from last last Saturday standard tournament in our local game store at the Proris Place. So the deck was the Rakdos Midrange deck, which was just currently updated with the rotation and the entry of Dominaria United. So this is not actually the exact list as per se, but similar strategy is still being implemented as to this per deck build as for today's explanation. So for short guide on this is from the MTG Arena Zone, wherein it was also described here as one of the top tier best of 3 standard Rakdos midrange decks, and it is considered as one of the metagame decks in this new setup with Dobuna United, having all of the new cards coincide with what this deck strategy has. So let's check on the creature lineup first. For this setup, we have 13 creatures, and the only difference from that build that I played was that I didn't add in the Ravenman, but instead played the 4th Graveyard Trespasser. So the same lineup of 13 creatures, and I had 2 Shieldred instead of just 1. So in this setup of the curve, you can basically go aggro with your 2 drops of Blood Tithe and Tenacious Underdog and just protect them by killing off creatures with Liliana, and also curving out into Fable and the big spell Invoke Despair. Now for this main strategy, if ever you get to go against a grindy matchup, Liliana is your best, probably the best choice here, because you can have synchronized discard effects which benefit you, such as discarding the extra Tenacious Underdog, wherein you can later on blitz it for its cost of 4 mana and 2 life, and then having also Shieldred Apocalypse just go on standby, as whenever an opponent draws a card, they lose 2 life, and those grindy setup, having them to lose 2 life at the least on each turn during your draw step is very relevant. Now for other usual shenanigans, we have Bloodlet Harvester, which can kill off opponent with its ability, and the Blood Token that can also use to discard some of your extra lands or irrelevant spells and draw to your deck up to the answer that is needed. Then we have a significant combo in the late game with Fable of the Mirror Breaker, flipping into Reflection of Kikijiki, wherein having to create tokens of this makes you or gives you supply of steady removal, at least 1 removal each turn, and producing more blood tokens in the process. At the same time, we also have solid spot removals with Infernal Grasp, although cut down might be particular in certain matchup, but in our build we favored the Soul Harvest before, instead of this setup, which just lean more against more aggressive matchups in the metagame. Now for the the Planeswalker choices, we also have a playset of Liliana and a copy of Sorin the Mirthless to go out with the curve, and to also produce threats with the discard 2-3 black vampires with Sorin generating, and also extra life gains can be used to get it to +1 to look at the top card and draw it, whereas losing the life in the process might be relevant in some scenario, but instead, I can just have them lose life and just draw a card or draw your extra lands through Soren's +1 ability. Now for the top curve of this deck, if ever you get situations wherein you just devastate your opponent's board, is to cast an Invoke Despair. So this 5 to cast sorcery from Kamigawa gets them to sacrifice a creature, a Planeswalker, and an enchantment. So in more matchups, usually you get to have them sacrifice their best creature. You can get also their own Liliana, and lose their Mirror Breaker or Myth of Massacre in the process. And at the same time, if there would be not no targets to satisfy this ability, you can just have them lose life, and another bonus to gain gain life with the Shieldred's trigger on you drawing a card from the invoke. So the important setup here is that you can get to go aggro, but if your early turns are dealt with you can just grind it out with Liliana and the Graveyard Trespasser's -1 ability, and also will show Dread's trigger forever. For every draw step or whenever they draw a card, they would lose life in this process. So for the matchup, I think I remember that I placed against Mono Red for round 1. So it was a pretty hasty setup, but good thing that I was able to draw most of my removals and also trade out a few spells with the Soul Dread Apocalypse coming up the board. Then also added in my sideboard cards like the Mythok Massacre and additional spot removals such as this one, Abrade, and more Mythoks in the board to deal with their cheap creatures. If we look at the visual view, you'll see it's the look of the mid-range Rakdos deck in the process. I personally would like Ravenman to have it here, but that would depend on how we would adjust the deck now for the weekend's game day tournament. So I would personally would like to have a Ravenman in the main deck as to cut out some options for in whenever the effect of having to discard a card is also would be relevant in the process. Now for the sideboard sizes, before we go with the rest of the matchups from that tournament, we would like to discuss how each of these cheap spot removals will be relevant in certain matchups. Also with the rest, which also helpful against Esper and other mid-range decks. Reckoner Bunkmaster also would be a good utility and mana sink for extra card draws, which will later becomes a 4/4 threat. A Licensers for Graveyard Shenanigans, or also for those with effects that can return cards from the graveyard to the battlefield, and added Mythok Massacre, which in the extra lose life and gain life effects, aside from just wiping out their board, can also becomes relevant if you ever to go with the combo of your late game with having Tenacious Underdogs being used as Blitz creature and sacrificing it as also gets the Mythok to trigger. Now for the rest of the matchup of the tournament, I was faced against Esper for the second round. It was quite a grindy game, but I was able to pull off with the last 5 turns by casting off enough creature threats and blitzing some other dogs to get through the damage. But the round 3 and round 4, it was both grindy games in the setup. I was faced in round 3 with the black-red Anvil version of the Rakdos deck. One game 1, but unfortunately game 2 and game 3 was quite in his favor. We were able to stall the last game until the 5 turns and time limit is reached. So we will try to rank the last 5 turns if I will able to get the maximum damage, but unfortunately it is still that the life total is very out of the range of this damage that I can brought. So we went that the draw. In the last game was against red green aggro, which was supposedly in my favor, but having one game 1 with the Shoulder Red and game 2 having to flood slightly, but also drawing irrelevant creatures, in which he was able to pull off with the Raiju. And then for the game 3, I got somewhat stuck at 3 lands, but I was able to hold up his board, given that it's also stuck, but he was able to draw more of his lands first, and then I get to stabilize with my Shoulder Red. Unfortunately, the last 5 turns has arrived and I wasn't able to reach enough damage for him. He was at 5 life at that time. I was about 14 or 15 life, but Shoulder being already out of the play in that setup, I tried to get past with some 3/2 attackers with a blitz underdog, but unfortunately he has a relevant blocker, the flip version of Commando faces Kakasan, wherein it has its effects that whenever a creature would die from damage from a source he controls, they would exile it instead. So the Mythok triggers, which I supposedly would able to use to reach full his remaining life total, was unable to trigger because of that setup. So we won't be able to get enough damage, given that I was able to also attack with both creatures Unfortunately, him blocking one would leave him to just one life instead of just having to trigger the meat hook. So I got run out of turns on the extra turns, so we still end up in a draw. So sadly, the tournament had me only at fifth place wherein I was only just able to cut short of the top four with the prices up only to the fourth place. But anyway, up to this deck, I would suggest this would still be a good tier 1 deck in the metagame. I'm pretty sure we would go with this build, but if you prefer to go against an aggro metagame in your area, then cut down main deck would still be a good choice on this one. But given that there are enough mid-range decks, then Soul Transfer would be your best setup in the main deck. Cut down would go on the side, or you would go with Voltage Surge as a solid 1 mana cost spot removal, and more of mid-range 3 main deck, which is quite slow in my case, but still it can be relevant already in pre-board in most of the mid-range matchups. So that's about it. Short deck discussion for the standard Rakdos mid-range, this metagame for the Manila United Standard, and my also short tournament report from the last weekend's event. So if you'd like to check them out, I would also try to get another report again with this weekend's game day, see my big event on our local game store, and also discuss what other changes I made for this deck setup. So that's about it. Thank you for checking this video. Until the next upload for deck tech for the Manila United, and see ya.